Hi everyone, I'm Shelly and you're watching There's No Place Like Home. I was going to say that I'm back with another homeschooling video. And while this video can certainly be applied to homeschooling, I think that really anybody can get something out of this idea. And here's what I'm going to talk about. A while back, I had posted some photos on Instagram that was just showing everyone the sorts of things that my children and I do during our first and last 6 weeks of school every year when the weather is warmer and when we can get outside, because my children love nature, they love getting dirty, they love exploring, so we take advantage of that as much as possible. I also showed some photos of things that we were doing in the house together: cooking, baking, painting, even doing cleanup around the house. And while it was well received, I did have one comment that really got me thinking about the way that our educational system is set up. The commenter said to me, "But isn't it more important that your children learn history than how to garden?" And my answer might surprise you. Well, if you know me, it might not surprise you. I will tell you that when I was asked that question, it inspired me to make up a list of topics that they should be teaching in schools and a list of topics of things that are taught in schools that will never have an impact on the lives of 99% of the children who learn them. So, some of the topics that I believe should be taught in schools are gardening, homeopathy, sewing. And I don't mean sewing as in, what did they call them? The rotations that they used to do in middle school, where we used to do like sewing for 6 weeks and maybe cooking for 6 weeks in our home ec thing. I don't even know if they do it like that anymore, but electives. I'm talking about sewing, where they actually learn how to make useful things, and it doesn't just last for one class a day for a few weeks and then it stops. I mean serious sewing that is actually going to be able to make things that are useful. Maintaining a car, home repair, budgeting, investing, building and maintaining credit, buying a house because it's pretty complicated, paying rent, canning, meal prep, cooking from scratch. Now, the list could go on farther, much further than what this has gone on, but I think you get the idea. Most of the things that I have mentioned here, at the most, are taught as electives, and they are classes that really don't last for very long. They're just something where you may touch on it and get the basics, but it's not something where you delve really deeply into it. Now, on the other hand, instead of children learning all of these useful skills, let's just go back and remember, if you can, some of the things that you learned in high school that were never useful to you at all. I can share with you some of them that I remember. We had to memorize the order of insects. We had to know what order every single kind of insect that we studied was in. And I'm talking probably at least 100 different insects. We had to know what order they were in. And I can assure you that me having this trivial knowledge that butterflies are in the order Lepidoptera has never come up in my life. Not even in a Trivial Pursuit game has it come up. The only time that I ever talk about butterflies being in the order of Lepidoptera is when I am ranting about the school system and how they teach useless things. Because yes, it is a useless thing, except in this case it's useful because I can complain about it. Factoring polynomials. 99% of the children who learn how to factor polynomials will never need them in real life. Ever. And you might be saying, "Oh, but they're going to need them for college." Well, why do they need to know it even in college? Why do colleges teach all of these useless things to students? Well, for two reasons. Because it's part of the dumbing down of the population. They're teaching things that we're never going to need to know, and instead of teaching things that are actually useful. And another reason that they do it is it's a money racket. It's a good way for them to make more money when you have all of these classes that are required, those gen ed classes that most people will never actually need in their careers. But yeah, that's the time that you'll need to know how to factor polynomials. And then after college, you will promptly forget how to factor polynomials, and unless you become a homeschool mom and have to learn it all over again. And then you can actually be honest with your child and explain to them that they will never need it for anything. Solving chemical equations. Yeah, some of your children may turn out to be chemists, and in that case, have at it. If you have a child that has inclinations towards these sorts of things, by all means, teach them to your children or have your children learn them. That does not mean that every child has to learn them, because for most children, it is a waste of time. What about knowing what a gerund is? Yes, it is important that we know how to speak well and that our children know how to write well, but you don't need to know what the definition of a gerund is in order to be able to write properly. Solving geometry proofs. Okay, I'm going to give geometry a little bit of a break because yes, there are certainly times that geometry is useful, especially when it comes to measuring. Geometry proofs, though, I have never met a single person who ever needed a geometry proof for anything that they have ever had to do. Even if they were a carpenter, for example, that did lots of measuring. Geometry proofs never figured into the equation. Another waste of time. What about the periodic table of elements? That huge table of elements that we were required to learn the chemical symbols for all of the elements on that chart. I can assure you that me knowing the chemical symbol for strontium has never helped me in my life. Instead of me memorizing what the periodic table was or what the chemical symbols were, I would much rather have been learning how to budget or the process of buying a house or how to build and maintain credit. Do you understand what I'm saying? So when we go back to the original question, isn't history more important than gardening? I'm going to tell you that no, I don't think that history is more important than gardening. At the very least, I will say at the most. It's important for your children to learn history just so that when other people talk about historical things, they will at least be able to add to the conversation. But when you are someone who is suspicious of the history that we've been taught because we see it being changed right in front of our eyes right now, you kind of lose the gumption to want to teach these things to your children. And instead, you want to teach your children things that are going to help them in the long run when they become adults. And who knows what the world is going to look like by that point in time. And the skills that I mentioned would certainly be helpful in any arena. That's all that I have for you today. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't subscribed yet and would like to hear more of what I have to say, I would love if you would do that. If you have any questions or comments, you can leave one either here or over on Instagram. And if you like my work and would like to check out my Patreon page, I will leave a link in the description box for that as well. And I hope you have a great day.